The door clicked shut behind me, and the deadbolt slid home. My own apartment. The one Arthur and I had shared for 11 years before he died. 4 weeks ago. Except it wasn't mine anymore. Eric had signed the change of locks the week after the funeral, and the sheriff's deputy had stood in the hallway while I carried out 2 suitcases and a box of Navy medals. The carpet still smelled like the lemon polish I'd used every Saturday. That sharp citrus bite hitting the back of my throat. I set the suitcases down on the cracked pavement outside, and the January air cut through my coat. Cold. Not the clean cold of a ship's deck, but the mean kind that gets under your ribs. Somewhere above me a heater kicked on with a metallic groan, then died. The sound followed me down the steps like a held breath finally let out. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to look. Eric's ringtone was the only one I'd never changed. Enjoying the sidewalk, Carolyn? His voice came through, lazy and bright, the way he sounded when cameras were near. The new owner said the lease was month to month. Turns out widows don't hold titles they never earned. I listened to the click of his pen. He always did that when he was enjoying himself. "You're just the widow, Carolyn," Eric said. "Sign the papers and let the real businessman run the show." I'd heard that line before. I'd hear it again before this was over. My name is Carolyn Blackwell, 52 years old. 22 years in Navy logistics, retired as a commander, and the largest shareholder in Blackwell Defense because Arthur put the company in both our names the year we married. Eric never read the filings. He read the headline and called himself Chief Executive Officer. The funeral had been 3 weeks prior. St. Mary's on the Hill, the one with the bell that rang every noon. Arthur's casket had been mahogany, closed, because the heart attack left him not fit for viewing. Eric stood at the grave in a black coat that cost more than my first car. He waited until the minister stepped away, then he leaned close to me. "Don't get comfortable in the big house," Eric said. "Dad was soft on you. I'm not." I nodded. The wind took my veil sideways across my face. "You heard me," Eric said. "You're a placeholder. A wife number 2 who showed up after the money was already made." "I heard you," I said. He thought that was submission. It wasn't. In the Navy, you learn the difference between a person who agrees and a person who is waiting for the right channel of command. 2 days after the burial, Eric called me to the office. The Blackwell Defense Building sat on the edge of town, glass and steel, the kind of place Arthur built to look like the future. Eric had redone the lobby with a waterfall wall that hummed under everything you said. He was behind Arthur's desk. My husband's desk. Eric's feet were up, and he'd moved the framed photo of Arthur and me to face the wall. "Sit," Eric said. "We're doing this today. Probate's a formality, but I need your signature on the transfer. Operational control, voting shares, the works." I sat. The leather chair still held Arthur's shape, a slight lean to the left where he'd rested his elbow for 20 years. "Read it," Eric said, sliding the stack across. "Or don't. Your call, but the papers go in today either way." "I'll read," I said. He sighed loud enough for the glass to catch it. "You always do this. Make it slow. You were a logistics clerk, Carolyn. A pencil pusher. Dad married you because you were convenient and quiet. Now he's gone, and the company needs a Blackwell at the helm, not a guest." I read every page. The language was clean: transfer of managerial authority, delegation of voting rights, acknowledgement of Eric as sole operative director. What Eric didn't know was that Arthur's original operating agreement required any transferee to hold a department-level security clearance of Tier B or higher before assuming control of classified contracts. Eric had a tourist pass from a factory tour. I'd seen it on his keychain. "I see the clause about clearance," I said, tapping the page. Eric laughed. "There's no clause. That's old paperwork. Marcus cleared it." Marcus hadn't cleared it. I knew because Arthur had shown me the file himself, the night before he died, when his hands were already blue at the knuckles, and he made me promise to watch the company the way I'd watched a supply line in Fallujah. "I'll sign," I said. Eric blinked. "That's it? No fight?" "The law was already on my side, Eric," I said. "You just never read the supporting documentation." I signed. He had the notary ready, a woman from the front desk who looked at the floor the whole time. I kept the certified copy in my coat, folded twice, beside the metal box. After he left the room to call his friends, I walked to the bank. The safe deposit box was in Arthur's name with me as co-holder. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was the security contract he'd never filed digitally. The clause was there in plain English. Any successor must present active Tier B clearance, verified by the Department of Defense, before assuming management of defense logistics accounts. Eric had none. The contract also named me interim custodian, should the successor fail qualification. I closed the box. The steel door made a sound like a gunbolt. That clean metallic snick that means something is locked, and you are the only one with the key. Dana was waiting by the water fountain when I came out. 26 years old, Arthur's junior assistant, the one who filed everything twice because Arthur liked redundancy. She straightened when she saw me. "Ma'am," Dana said. "He's been changing the routing logs. Since day one." "I know," I said. "I need you to keep logging. Every change, every file he touches. Mirror it to the offsite account Arthur set up. He won't look there." Dana's fingers tightened on her tablet. "He calls me girl to the partners. Thinks I don't hear the quotes. Files are mirrored and sent, ma'am." He never noticed the system's review capabilities. "Good," I said. "Keep it quiet. 6 months of clean records, and we have him." She nodded once. Sharp. The way Arthur trained his people. Then she walked back inside, like nothing had happened. Eric found me in the hallway an hour later. He'd taken off the suit jacket and rolled his sleeves, playing founder for a group of suppliers in the conference room behind him. "Carolyn," Eric said, loud enough for them to hear. "Still here? I told you the building's under new management." "You told me," I said. "Go home. Or don't. The locks change Friday." He turned to the men behind him. "Gentlemen, my stepmother never quite understood the business. Lovely woman, zero instinct. Dad kept her for appearances." One of the suppliers, a gray-haired man named Holt, nodded politely. Eric put his arm around nothing and kept talking. "We're restructuring the whole logistics chain," Eric said. "Cutting the DoD reporting layers. Faster, leaner, nobody breathing down our neck. I built this new model on the flight back from Aspen." Holt's eyebrows went up. "You're changing the reporting protocol on the defense contracts? That's federally regulated, son." "Relax, Holt," Eric said. "I run the show now. The old rules were Dad's paranoia. We ship when we ship." I walked past them without a word, but I heard Holt's boots stop on the tile. Heard the silence where Eric's laugh used to fill the space. That was the moment Eric broke the law. Not on paper yet. In his mouth, in front of witnesses, on a recorded company floor. That night, I sat in the small apartment Dana had helped me rent, a studio above a bakery, where the morning smelled of burnt sugar. I opened the certified copy and read Eric's signature against Arthur's clause. The mismatch was a weapon, and I'd been trained to load slow. Marcus called 2 nights later. The family attorney, 60-something, the man who'd drawn Arthur's will with his own hand. His voice came low and formal, the way it got when something was wrong. "Mrs. Blackwell, I have allowed Mr. Eric to believe I have transferred all control, as he requested. I have, to a point, ceased representing you, pursuant to his instruction." I listened to the weight in that sentence. Marcus never wasted words. "Subject to what condition?" I said. "Subject to the terms already filed, ma'am," Marcus said. "Which he believes he has satisfied. He does not know the contents of the vault key I retain." Eric was in the next room, I later learned. He'd been pressing Marcus for weeks, and Marcus had let him think the win was total. The key to Arthur's private vault never left Marcus's pocket. Eric celebrated. I noted the date. By February's end, Eric had cut my name from the payroll, frozen the joint accounts Arthur left, and told the family I'd chosen to step away. Cousins stopped returning my calls. The country club sent a letter reclaiming the membership Arthur paid for in full. I read it at the kitchen table and drank cold coffee. Dana kept sending files. 3 a week. Routing changes. Deleted audit logs. A purchase order for materials never delivered, paid twice. She logged each one with Arthur's old codes. In March, Eric threw the launch party. $200,000 borrowed against the family estate, the old house on the hill with Arthur's bell. He invited the press. He rented a tent bigger than the chapel. I heard about it from Dana, who'd been told to print the place cards. Sir said put founder and chief executive on all of them, Dana said. I filed the loan docs too, ma'am. He mortgaged the property. Logged? I said. Mirrored and sent, Dana said. He never noticed the audit trail. Eric called me the night of the party. Music loud behind him, a band playing something with a horn section. Carolyn, you should see this, Eric said. 40 journalists. Dad's whole world. And they're calling me the future. Where are you? Still in the studio above the bakery? I'm where I need to be, I said. Enjoy the quiet, Eric said. Because after Friday, even your name comes off the door. I hung up. Then I opened the secured channel Arthur had shown me how to use, the one that went straight to the Office of Inspector General. I typed the reference numbers Dana had collected. No names. No threat, just the logs. In April, Eric called again. Calmer, almost friendly, the way predators get when they think the cage is locked. I cleared the records, Carolyn, Eric said. Every discrepancy, every old entry, wiped and reissued. Marcus says it's clean. You could sue, but you'd lose. You have nothing. I have what Arthur left me, I said. He left you a guest room and a pension, Eric said. Take it. Or don't. Nobody's asking. I didn't answer. Dana's files told the real story. Eric had wiped the company copy but not the department mirror. Arthur had built that redundancy into the contract after the 2009 audit. Eric never read past page 1. By May, the New Era banner hung in the lobby. Eric's face on it, young, smiling, styled like a magazine. The launch was set for the 15th. Invitations went to the governor's office, the Chamber of Commerce, the defense attachés Arthur had entertained for 20 years. Dana came to me the Monday before. She held a thin folder. Ma'am, he changed the shipment manifests, Dana said. Rerouted 3 DoD contracts through a broker with no license. I logged it. Filed under the old code. He thinks the code's dead. Keep it, I said. 1 more week. She left. I sat by the window. The bakery below fired its ovens at 4 in the morning, and the heat came up through the floor in waves. I'd served on ships where the deck was hotter. This was a different kind of wait. Not the wait for orders. The wait for a man to hang himself where the law could watch. Eric's last call before the launch was short. Tomorrow's the day, Carolyn, Eric said. The new era starts, and you're a footnote. Sign the release I sent, and I'll let you keep the medals. I signed what mattered, I said. The rest is yours to explain. He laughed and cut the line. The morning of the 14th, a letter came from the Department of Defense. Official envelope, thick stock, the seal pressed deep enough to feel through the paper. I ran my thumb over it before opening. The ink smelled faintly of the government print office, that flat mineral scent. Inside, the words were plain. A routine compliance review had been scheduled for Blackwell Defense. Inspectors from the department would arrive within 72 hours to verify all defense logistics records against federal filings. The letter noted that any successor officer must present Tier B clearance at the time of inspection. I read it twice, then I set it on the table beside Arthur's certified copy. The 2 papers lined up like shells in a magazine. Eric didn't know yet. He was at the venue, fitting his speech, practicing the line about the future. He thought the records were clean because he'd cleaned the only copy he could see. The phone rang. Dana. Ma'am, he just deleted the master log, Dana said. All of it. He thinks it's gone. The mirror's full, ma'am. Every entry since February. He never noticed the audit trail even once, failing to monitor the off-site backup. Good work, I said. I looked at the letter one more time. The inspection would land one day after his launch, in the middle of his new era, with the press still in town. Eric would stand at the podium, and the federal inspectors would walk in asking for clearance he didn't hold, and records he'd destroyed. The envelope was still warm from my thumb. Outside, the bakery's first trays hit the oven, and the smell of sugar rose through the floor. Somewhere across town a bell rang, the one at St. Mary's, marking the hour Arthur used to call me home. My phone lit with a new notification. Routine inspection confirmed by the department. Agents would arrive at the company address on the 16th of May, 2024, at 0900 hours. You're just the widow, Carolyn. Sign the papers and let the real businessman run the show. Eric's voice rang through the phone, full of the kind of self-assurance one possesses only when never truly tested. I held the receiver away from my ear, observing the steam curling from my coffee mug on the rented kitchen counter. The apartment was a compact space, 2 rooms above a bakery in a town Eric had never set foot in, and the floor would gently vibrate as the ovens roared to life at 4 a.m. I signed what mattered, I said. He laughed, a short bark, and the line went dead. The Department of Defense letter rested on the table next to Arthur's certified copy. It had been 2 weeks since Eric's call. His launch party on the 15th had been a grand display of borrowed funds and impressive lighting, with invitations distributed to the governor's office, the Chamber of Commerce, and the defense attachés whom Arthur had hosted for 2 decades. I had not received an invitation. Dana came to me the morning after, quiet in the hallway, her coat still damp from the rain. "Ma'am, he took the $200,000 against the estate," Dana said. "Mortgage on the Connecticut house. Broker's note filed under his cousin's name." I mirrored the transaction details. She set a thin envelope on the table. "He thinks the paper trail stops at the family trust." It doesn't. I logged the transfer through the old audit code. I nodded. The old code was dead by every manual Eric had read, which meant he had never read the one that mattered. Arthur built that redundancy after the 2009 review. Eric never read past page 1. My phone rang at noon. "Marcus." The lawyer's voice was low, measured, the way a man speaks when he is performing a role he does not believe in. "Mrs. Blackwell, I have allowed Mr. Eric to believe I have transferred all control, as he requested," Marcus said. "Following his instructions, the firm no longer holds your interests in any capacity subject to his perceived direction." The words were heavy with condition, every syllable placed like a stone. I listened. Eric was on the other line, patched through, and I could hear the faint click of his breathing. "I understand, Marcus," I said. "You've done exactly what I told you." Marcus paused, a beat too long for a man with something to hide. "Subject to the vault provisions, of course," he said. "Those remain outside my mandate." Then he hung. Eric called back within the hour, victorious. "You heard him, Carolyn." Even Marcus folded. "The whole machine's mine now. What are you going to do, live on pension crumbs?" I poured the cold coffee down the sink. "I'm doing fine," I said. "Better than the man who borrowed $200,000 against his own inheritance to rent a stage." He went quiet, then laughed again, less sure. "You don't know what you're talking about. The books are clean. I buried the old logs myself." "I'm sure you did," I said, and ended the call. The cut came the next week. Eric terminated my access to the household accounts, the retirement disbursement Arthur had structured, the stipend from the family trust that had been mine by contract for 22 years. The bank letter arrived in a plain envelope. I read it standing in the bakery's warmth, flour on the air, and felt nothing like the panic Eric had expected. Dana watched from the doorway. "Ma'am, he closed your credit at the firm card too," Dana said. "Filed it as administrative." I kept the record. "Good," I said. "Keep everything." We built the file through March and April. Dana brought pages folded in her coat, slipped across the table at the library, the park, the bus stop, where no one from Blackwell Defense would look for a former commander. She logged Eric's rerouting of 3 defense contracts through a broker with no license. She filed his deletion of the master log, the one he thought had vanished, every entry since February preserved in the department mirror Arthur had built. "He never noticed the audit trail," Dana said one evening. Rain on the window, her hands quick on the folder. "Echo Foxtrot Bravo, ma'am. The code holds." I touched the page. Arthur's handwriting was on the margin of the original contract, a note to me. "Protect the redundancy. The boy will trust what he can see." I submitted the package through the anonymous channel the Inspector General's office accepted, a post office box in another state, no return address, the files on paper the way Arthur would have wanted. The department would verify against federal filings. Eric could not pass the inspection without Tier B clearance, and he had never held it. The letter had said agents would arrive on the 16th of May, at 0900. His launch was the 15th. The press would still be in town. Eric called on the evening of the 14th, before the party, his voice thick with triumph. "You're nobody now, Carolyn." I checked the filings myself. Clean. The new era's locked in. "And you're a footnote in a rented apartment." I listened to the clink of glass behind him, the murmur of guests still lingering. "You looked at the wrong copy," I said. "There's another." "There's no other," he said, and the laughter was gone now, replaced by something thinner. I deleted the master. I watched it go. "You watched what you could see," I said. "Arthur built the part you couldn't." He hung up without another word. The 15th passed. I sat by the window and watched the bakery below, the trays going into the ovens, the heat rising through the floor in waves. Dana texted once. "Ma'am, he's at the venue, practicing the future speech. Thinks it's over." I did not answer. The wait was its own discipline, the kind I had learned on ships where orders came late and you held your post regardless. The morning of the 16th opened gray. My phone lit at 8:40. A number I did not recognize, government prefix, the kind that does not leave messages. I answered. "Mrs. Blackwell, this is Special Agent Hollis with the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General, accompanied by a logistics compliance examiner from the Pentagon. We are at your residence to confirm the evidentiary materials you submitted are accurate and voluntarily provided. Please step outside." I looked through the curtain. 2 vehicles sat at the curb, unmarked, and 2 figures in dark coats stood on the walk, one holding a clipboard, the other a sealed carton. The bell at St. Mary's rang the hour Arthur used to call me home, and I reached for my coat, a familiar comfort, pushed open the curtain and stepped onto the walk. The gray morning air sharp against my face, and Special Agent Hollis nodded once before the examiner flipped the carton open on the hood of the unmarked car. "Mrs. Blackwell, we have cross-referenced your submitted pages against the federal filings," Hollis said, her voice flat and official. "The discrepancies in contract routing are confirmed. We will execute the venue inspection this evening, prior to the close of his event." The examiner, a thin man with a Pentagon badge clipped to his coat, tapped the clipboard. The Tier B clearance deficiency alone invalidates his signature on the transfer. "We need you to remain available." "I will be at the bakery apartment," I said. "Dana has the live mirror if he moves anything else." Hollis met my eyes. "You built this quiet, Commander. We read your service record. That helps." They drove off without another word. I went back upstairs and watched the clock. The launch was set for that night, the 15th. And Eric had booked the old country club in Westchester, the one Arthur refused to set foot in after the membership voted out a Navy widow. Dana texted at noon. "Ma'am, he's at the venue. Caterers arrived, press badge count is 11. He asked me to print the future speech again. I printed the federal copy instead, in the drawer under his." I did not answer. The discipline held. Wait, watch, move on the order. The light went long and orange through the window. I ate a roll the baker left at my door, the crust still warm, and thought of Arthur's note in the margin. "Protect the redundancy. The boy will trust what he can see." Eric had always trusted surfaces. The expensive shoes, the borrowed money, the deleted file he watched vanish on a screen he thought was the only one. Dana called at 7. "Ma'am, they're seating." "He's at the podium in the Navy suit, the one Mr. Arthur said made him look like a car salesman. He's wearing the Italian shoes. Said it on purpose, said you'd never afford to look at a pair." "Log the shoes," I said. Arthur's contract listed appearance of regulated materials as a logged item. He never read that page. "Already logged, ma'am," Dana said, and the line went quiet. "He's starting." I set the phone on the table and let the evening carry. The country club sat 3 towns over, and I would not be there. The department would. Hollis had said evening, and the inspection would land in the middle of his speech, the way Arthur used to say a correction should arrive when the man most believed he was right. The text came at 7:40. "Ma'am, they're at the door. 2 federal, 1 examiner. He's still talking." The room went quiet behind him. I closed my eyes. The warmth of the bakery rose through the floor. For a moment I let the silence hold, then opened them and watched the dark. Eric's voice filled the ballroom, bright and unchecked, the kind of confidence that only exists when a man has never been corrected by someone who outranks him. "Ladies and gentlemen, partners, press, Welcome to the new era of Blackwell defense, he said, arms spread, the Italian shoes catching the chandelier light. My father built the foundation, but I built the future. We have streamlined logistics, cut the dead weight, and opened contracts my predecessor was too cautious to touch. The widow signed it all away. The company is mine, clean and locked. A man in a dark coat walked to the edge of the stage. Special Agent Hollis did not raise her voice. Mr. Blackwell, I am with the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General. This is Mr. Pell, Logistics Compliance Examiner from the Pentagon. We are conducting an immediate inspection of your federal contract records pursuant to the Defense Security Statute. Please provide the master log for the 3 rerouted accounts. Eric laughed, the sound thin at the edges. There's no master log. I deleted it. I watched it go. Whatever you think you have, it's not from me. Pell stepped forward, clipboard open. The Federal Mirror shows the deletions occurred on February 19th, March 3rd, and April 11th, each performed from your terminal under your access code. The mirror is maintained by the department independent of your system. You cannot delete what the department holds. I don't know what mirror you mean, Eric said, and his hand went to the podium, fingers white. This is a misunderstanding. My lawyer transferred everything. Marcus said so himself. Marcus stood near the back, coat buttoned, voice carrying clear across the room. Mr. Blackwell, pursuant to the private vault provisions outside my transferred mandate, I advised you that certain records remained with the department. You elected not to review the clause. I have the recorded advisory from January. You said you gave me everything, Eric said, turning toward him. You said it on the phone. I heard you. I said I transferred the control you requested, Marcus said, calm as a notary. The vault and its federal filings were never within that request. Subject to the statute, they remained. As they remain, the examiner tapped the clipboard. Mr. Blackwell, explain the variance between your filed contract values and the department's recorded values for the 3 accounts. The difference totals $200,000 routed to a broker without license. Eric shook his head, the smile fixed and wrong. That's a clerical entry. Dana, show them the corrected file. Girl, the one on my desk. Dana stepped from the side, folder in hand, and opened it on the podium. Sir, this is the print from your drawer. The federal copy. The values match the department, not your speech. I logged the routing through Echo Foxtrot Bravo, the code Mr. Arthur built. You never noticed the audit trail. You, Eric said, and the word came out like a slap. You were copying me. I was filing, sir, Dana said, eyes on the folder. As the protocol required, ma'am trained me to. Carolyn, Eric said, the name a curse now, turning to the empty air as if I stood there. This is her. She's nowhere, and she did this. She's the widow, she signed. She's nothing. Hollis interjected, voice even. Mr. Blackwell, the certified copy of the transfer bears your signature and lacks the Tier B clearance the security contract requires. Under the Defense Security Act, your assumption of management is invalid. You altered federal records for private gain. We are placing you under detention pending formal charge. I built this, Eric said, the words scraping. I built the future. My father never gave me the chance, but I built it. Your father built the redundancy so this company would survive you, I said. I had walked in. The side door, the one Arthur used when he wanted to hear the room before it heard him. I stood at the edge of the chandelier light, coat still bearing the bakery's flour smell. Eric, I signed because the law was already on my side. You just never read the underlying agreements. He stared, the Italian shoes planted like anchors he thought would hold. You're just the widow. You can't be here. You have no rights. I hold the certified copy and the security contract, I said. The department holds the mirror. Dana holds the live log. You held a screen you thought was the only one. That was your mistake. Pell read from the clipboard. Mr. Blackwell, you will accompany us. Do not speak to the press. The board will be notified of the invalidation within the hour. Eric's shoulders dropped, the navy suit suddenly too large. Marcus, fix this. Call the firm. Tell them it's a mistake. Marcus inclined his head, measured. Mr. Blackwell, I have advised you to the limit of the transferred mandate. The vault key remains with me, as the provision requires. I will advise the board that all your resolutions are void. Subject to the statute, the company returns to the holding recorded before your assumption. A reporter near the front raised a phone. Eric saw it, and the last of the performance left his face. Hollis guided him toward the door, one hand at his elbow, the other on the carton of evidence. He did not resist. The shoes clicked on the marble, then the carpet, then the gravel outside where the federal vehicle waited. Dana closed the folder. "Ma'am, the board line is open. The resolutions are void as of the reading." He never held clearance. "I know," I said. Arthur knew. That's why the note said protect the redundancy. The examiner nodded to me, then followed Hollis out. Marcus passed close, his voice low. "Mrs. Blackwell, the vault provisions are intact. The company rests with the pre-assumption holding. You may appoint at your discretion." "I appoint Dana," I said. She logged the trail. "She knows the protocol." Dana's hands stilled on the folder. "Ma'am, I'm 26. The board won't." "The board has no choice," Marcus said, quiet. "The security contract vests management in the largest shareholder's appointee, absent a cleared successor. Miss, you are appointed." Eric's voice rose from the gravel, faint through the glass. "This is a mistake. I built the future. I built it." No one answered him. The vehicle door closed. The press light swung from the club entrance to the curb, then back, confused. I turned from the window and looked at the podium, the speech still printed, the Italian shoes abandoned beneath it. Dana gathered the folder. "Ma'am, the federal copy is sealed. The mirror holds. He can't touch it from where he's going." "I'll take the train home," I said. "You stay and log the close. Every entry, Arthur's way." She nodded, then paused. "Ma'am, the letter from Mr. Arthur, the one in the vault. You said it was the last commitment page." "I have it," I said. "He wrote it the week before he died. Thank you for always protecting our legacy." He knew Eric would reach for the surface and miss the depth. The country club emptied in pieces, the caterers folding chairs, the press drifting to their cars with nothing usable. I walked the side path to the road, the night cool, and reached the small apartment above the bakery as the ovens cooled below. On the table lay the vault page, Arthur's handwriting loose and warm, the last line clear. I read it once, then set it down and watched the street until the federal taillights vanished toward the county road. The morning after, Dana texted. "Ma'am, board confirmed void. Company on hold for reassessment. He's at the county holding since last night." Marcus filed the vault notice. "I'm at the desk, logged and present." I answered once. "Hold the protocol. I'll come by noon." The last I saw of Eric was through the bakery window. A still frame on the news a neighbor left open, the Italian shoes gone, the navy suit replaced by the county orange, the caption saying detained pending federal charge. The door of the transport closed on the image, and the screen went dark. The screen stayed black. The streetlight outside the bakery threw a rectangle of gold across the table, and Arthur's letter lay half in it, the paper warm where the bulb had touched it. I read it again. "You were never the surface, Carolyn. Don't let the aftermath make you one." I folded it once, sharp, and put it inside my jacket. Dana's texts came through the morning like a clock. Board confirmed. Holding confirmed. Marcus filed. I answered each with one word. Received. I didn't go to the office at noon. I went downstairs. The bakery was loud. The ovens were ticking as they cooled, and Mrs. Lynn was scraping the day's trays, flour on her apron like a second skin. She looked up when I came through the door and didn't say anything. She just set down a bowl of dough and a rolling pin. "Arthur's recipe," she said. I sat at the corner table where he used to sit on Saturday mornings, before the meetings, before everything got large. I rolled the dough. Press and turn. Press and turn. My hands remembered the rhythm while my mind was still catching up to the silence upstairs. By afternoon, the news cycle moved on. The neighbor closed his laptop and went back to his garden. The Italian shoes were at the bottom of some dumpster behind the club, or in evidence. I didn't check. That evening, I spread Arthur's letter on the table again. Tucked inside the envelope was another page, paper thinner than the rest, a list of addresses in a handwriting I recognized from postcards he'd mailed during our first year. Paris, Lyon, A street in Lisbon with a bakery address underlined twice. At the bottom, a note. The redundancy isn't the company. It's the morning. Make one. I sat with the list while the street went from gold to gray to black. Somewhere, a car radio played a song I used to know. I thought about the person I had been half a year ago. The one who had stood at Arthur's grave and decided to burn the world down to keep his name from being dirt. She had been right about Eric. She had been wrong about what came after. Revenge doesn't fill the space where a person used to be. It just rearranges the furniture until you can't find the door. The next morning, I called Dana and told her to suspend the dissolution vote. She asked if I was sure. I told her Arthur had left a different instruction than the one in the vault. She said she would draft the memo. Then I went back to rolling dough. Mrs. Lynn taught me the sourdough starter that week. The bakery oven had a hot spot in the back left corner that scorched anything left too long, and I learned to turn the trays. People started showing up before dawn for the loaves before the office rush. They didn't know my name. They didn't know about the vault or the board or the nights I spent making calls I hated. They just knew the bread. By the time the reassessment came through, Dana had already built a new governance structure from the Arthur-era bylaws I had never opened. She sent me the draft while I was shaping croissants. I signed it without reading every line. Marcus called it prudent. I called it breathing. The Italian shoes were never mentioned again. Eric's voice from the gravel faded into the same frequency as the old grievances. The part of me that had thought winning would feel like waking up. It didn't. Waking up felt like waking up. Bread felt like something else. Something that didn't need an audience. On the last day of the reassessment, Dana came to the bakery instead of the office. She wore the same navy suit, but her hands were shaking when she set the final paperwork on the table. "He's been charged," she said. "Federal." The holding company transferred back clean. "You're clear, ma'am." "Completely." I nodded and slid a warm loaf across the table. She stared at it, then picked it up and broke it open. The crust crackled. "We should celebrate," she said. "We did," I said. "Yesterday." She ate the bread and didn't push it. Outside, the morning was ordinary. A delivery truck double-parked. A woman walked a dog that stopped at every hydrant. The sun came up over the brick wall and touched the ovens through the kitchen window. I thought about telling the story then, how it had started with a note and ended with a loaf, how I had spent months trying to outsmart a man who only knew how to take up space, and how the thing that actually brought me back was a recipe Arthur had written on a card with a coffee stain in the corner, the kind of thing I had never bothered to read until the vault was empty and the suit was gone. But I didn't say it. Some stories don't need to be told until someone asks. When she left, I stayed behind the counter and watched the street. The day opened up in front of me, the way days do when you're not waiting for the other shoe to drop. I thought about calling the number on the back of Arthur's old card, the one for the supplier in Lyon, just to hear a voice from the life he wanted instead of the life he left. I didn't call. Not yet. But I wrote the number down on a card of my own and taped it inside the flour bin, where I would see it every morning. The first loaf I baked alone came out dark on the bottom and too pale on top. Mrs. Lynn laughed and said it was the baker's tax. I ate the end piece standing at the counter, warm and rough and real, and for the first time since Arthur died, I didn't feel like I was performing for an audience that had already left the room. The sun moved across the floor, the ovens ticked. Somewhere down the road, a truck backfired, and a bird landed on the awning and pecked at the crumbs I'd missed. I wiped my hands on my apron and waited for the morning to finish its work. It always does, if you let it. If you're still in the middle of the fire, standing where I stood with a vault full of paper and a heart full of ash, know this. The revenge part is just the prologue. The story that matters is the one you build after the screen goes dark. Make the thing that outlasts the noise. Feed the people who stay. And when you're ready, tell someone the story that made you. Not the one that won, but the one that built you. I'm listening. You walked into this story thinking the win was the point, but the win was just the noise that covered the silence you were afraid to hear. Carolyn spent months chasing a man's shadow through vaults and boardrooms, certain that clearing Arthur's name would be the same as getting him back, and she learned the hard way that revenge and vindication only rearrange the emptiness without filling it. The lesson is concrete. When someone you love is gone, the instinct to fight for their memory is real, but the fight will not bring them home. And the longer you perform for an audience that has already left the room, the more you forget how to stand still and breathe. What actually rebuilt her was a sourdough starter, a hot oven, and the strangers who showed up for bread they did not understand the cost of. So the takeaway is not abstract. Do the small thing in front of you that does not need a witness. Feed the people who stay. And let the story that built you replace the one that won. When the reassessment cleared, and the shoes were never mentioned again, she was not free because she beat Eric. She was free because she stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. Now ask yourself, when the noise finally died down in your own life, what small thing did you build with your hands that no one clapped for? And who sat at your table and broke bread with you while you were still learning how to be ordinary again?